The Gnosis. A tiny little thing that has so many implications, creates so many questions, and gives us absolutely no answers. But today, I hope to be able to answer the question, or at the very least, shed some light on what does a Gnosis do? Spoiler warnings for every Archon quest before patch 2.2, and Venti, Zhongli, and A's story quests. This doesn't include Chasm lore because at the time of making this, I haven't done it yet. I don't think they'll cover Gnosis lore in it, but I have no idea, and so if it does, you won't see it mentioned here. Anyway, with that all out of the way, in order to get an idea of what the Gnosis do, let's look at what the Archons did before, during, and after having one. First, who were the Archons before they had Gnosis? Before he was Barbados, Venti was a wind spirit. Now, we have next to no idea of what his powers were in that state, but I believe he is what is considered a creature of the light realm. I plan on making a video soon that goes into more detail about the light, human, and void realms, but for now, we'll stick with the definition of most elemental beings are of the light realm. If you look at the archive entries for bishops and slimes, they both are referred to as light realm creatures. Seeing as Venti was, quote, but a single thread of the 1,000 winds that roared through the northern lands, unquote, it would make sense that he is of the light realm and of the animal variety, meaning he does have some innate elemental power. Now, here's where it gets a little weird. When his friend died in the battle against Decarabian to free old Mondstadt, Venti just kind of becomes a god. Here's the quote. With the crumbling of an ancient seat of divinity, a new god was born. The animal archon Barbados felt power flowing at his fingertips. Doesn't mention a Gnosis or even Celestia in the slightest. But with his new power, he took on the form of his fallen friend and he swept the snow from Mondstadt and split the mountains. Now, I don't know about you, but to me, that sounds like kind of a lot for someone who had been a tiny wind spirit 5 minutes ago. So what I'm gonna go ahead and guess is that this did not happen in a matter of minutes. And even though Venti's character story doesn't mention Celestia, I'm inclined to believe they're involved. This event takes place within the Archon War, approximately 2,600 years ago from the in-game present day. From the time Decarabian fell to when Venti terraformed Mondstadt, Andreas would have had to have given up on his claim to the position of Mondstadt's Archon, Venti would have had to have ascended to Celestia or have been given godhood from a former god in order to achieve godhood, and be recognized by Celestia as the Animo Archon and given the Gnosis in order to be considered Barbados in legend as the one who terraformed Mondstadt, not just some really powerful wind spirit. As it seems his ascension to godhood and the bestowing of the Gnosis occurred in pretty quick succession, we don't really know what he could do as a god, but not yet an Archon. So Venti's powers pre-Gnosis are mostly unknown. Now, Zhongli has done, a lot before receiving a Gnosis. He does have the benefit of being 3,000 years older than every other Archon, so I will absolutely miss things that he did, and this isn't gonna be a detailed retelling or anything, because this is a video about Gnosis, not about him. I'm just gonna try to give you a greatest hits of sorts, for a general idea. We don't ever get an origin story for him. All we know about him himself is he is an Adeptus, and he became a god long before the Archon War. There's no description of how he becomes a god. The first stories of him are where he is assumedly already god. Morax's most notable accomplishments in terms of power, mostly elemental, include raising Mount Tianheng, a whole mountain, gave sight to Asia, wielded massive stone spears, and summoned meteors, a geo whale, and stone birds. Clearly, he had the use of geo before having a Gnosis, and pretty significantly at that. The twin gods A and Makoto also don't have an origin story from before they were gods. The first we know of them is after their ascension to godhood. Similarly to Venti, we don't get to see what they can do before Makoto becomes the Electro Archon. All we know is that they slew every other Inazuman god, except maybe Urabashi. He might have already fallen to Byakuya-goku or Enkanomiya at this point in time, and wouldn't be slain until after Makoto is the reigning Inazuman Archon. The wiki at this point makes the assumption that although Urabashi was killed before the Archon War ended, he didn't die in the Inazuman conflict, just during the time period in which the war was still ongoing elsewhere, and so that's what I'm gonna roll with as well. A side tangent about Makoto ascending to Celestia. The Archon War's last man standing rule still held true for the twins. Yainiko says that Makoto and A won the Archon War together, but according to the Treasured Tales of the Chokin Shinkaguchi, which A in her voice line says is true, that's not the case. Treasured Tales states that since A believed herself to be a better warrior and her sister to be the better suited of the two for the role of Archon, she gives up her life so that her sister may ascend to the Heavenly Citadel and obtain dominion over Inazuma. After Makoto had set up the shogunate and had secured her rule of Inazuma, she recalled A's divine will and reforged her body, thus returning her sister to her side once more as her Kagemusha. Now, we don't know if this reforged her body is something she did with her Gnosis, her own powers, or something she learned, but she did create human life. And also, A died for her sister's success. Maybe that's why Makoto went to Kanria herself instead of sending A, who was the significantly better fighter of the two. Maybe she wanted to repay the debt. Anyway, that's enough of that. Don't want to make this sad. Second, who were they with Gnosis? As we stated before, Venti completely terraformed Mondstadt, sweeping the ice and snow from the land, and shortening some mountains, like Pylos Peak, which got sliced clean off and landed in the ocean, where it would become known as Musk Reef and house the entrance to the Spiral Abyss. After the birth of Dvalin, Venti befriended him, and then promptly fell asleep for 1600 years. As one does. The next we see him, he uses his animo to assist Vanessa in saving Mondstadt from both Ursa the Drake and the greedy upper-class nobles. After that, he doesn't really do much, and probably goes back to sleep until the Cataclysm. He assists the Traveler in fighting and saving Dvalin before his Gnosis is taken by Signora, but the only mildly impressive thing we see him do is really just keep us flying after Dvalin whips up a storm in Mondstadt that blows us up into the sky. Since the powers we see him use before his Gnosis is stolen don't appear to be any different than the ones we see him use after, it's entirely possible that he hasn't used whatever power is stored in the Gnosis since killing Durin with Dvalin, or even since helping Vanessa. After Morax has been given a Gnosis, there's hardly anything documented of what he does with it. He attempted to help age Jaha's erosion through giving him some of his power, and ultimately sealed him away with the help of 3 other Adepti. Also, the Golden House was established, and he was responsible for minting and making Mora that became not only Liyue's official currency, but the accepted currency of all of Tavad. That's it, though. For a guy who did so much prior to and during the Archon War, gaining a Gnosis really didn't seem to mean much to him. Now, the case of A and Makoto is interesting, because a lot of things that were documented as the Raiden Shogun's acts in terms of martial prowess were probably A, but she isn't the one with the Gnosis. What Makoto did with her Gnosis is rule Inazuma, make the sacred Sakura with the Time God's help, and die. A killed Urabashi with the Muso no Hitotachi, a massive electro strike that created the Musojin Gorge and the electro energy that stays there even now. She also killed the Thunderbird that messed with the ley lines of Surumi Island, and then sealed its power in shrines across Seirai Island. However, it's unknown whether she did this of her own power, or if she borrowed Makoto's Gnosis to do it, or something. It's clearly possible to give your Gnosis to someone else willingly, as Zhongli gave his to Signora, but there's no way of knowing currently if they can actually use it, or if it's a tool that can only be unlocked by the correct person. A doesn't say she tried to do anything with it apart from create a vessel for it, which she gave up on after Scaramouche and other failed projects weren't working as desired, so that's currently something we can only speculate about right now. There's more discussion to be had about this, but we're gonna come back to it later. Third, who are they without Gnosis now? All 3 of the Archons we have met can still use elemental abilities without a Gnosis. It's how they are considered playable characters, and also, in their story quests, we see them still using their elements. Venti shows himself as Barbados to Stanley, and creates an illusion of wind blowing in the Marjavari. Zhongli uses a Geo shield to keep himself and the traveler safe against the miners being controlled by Asia's malevolent persona. And A beat the traveler once, nearly did a second time until Yaimiko showed up, and also defeated her own puppet in a realm of consciousness. Also, her automaton Shogun can use Electro without a vision or Gnosis, so A can when she uses it as a body as well. So clearly, neither Gnosis nor visions are required for a god to use elemental energy. So then, what the hell do Gnosis do? Well, Morax needs it to make Mora, right? After he gives Signora his Gnosis, he says production at the Golden House will halt, due to needing the power of the Geo Archon. What else could he be referring to but the Geo-Gnosis? Well, yes and no. I don't think he actually needs the Gnosis to produce Mora. In his first story quest, it is said that when Liyue Harbor was being constructed, the Mora was first minted and used to create a house as an example for his people. But many other sources in the game suggest that Liyue Harbor was established before the end of the Archon War, and that Morax didn't win his title of Geo Archon until after Liyue Harbor was settled, feeling a need to protect it, which would mean the first Mora were made before he ever had a Gnosis. Also, needing the power of the Geo Archon could just mean, if everyone thought the Geo Archon was dead, it'd be weird if Mora was still being made. It's probably something he can do on his own, but the Gnosis enhances how much of it and how fast it can be made. We do know the Gnosis does something, because in Zhongli's Ascension lines he says he never believed he could be powerful again without it, meaning it clearly had some impact. We just might never know what that impact is, considering how tight-lipped every single Archon is. Well, A and Makoto have completely separate realms of consciousness that we've never seen any other person do. That seems like it'd be insanely powerful, so it's gotta be a Gnosis thing, right? Well, once again, no. In the book Flowers for Princess Fischl, there's things called Sommernachtgardens, or Summerlands. It is said that those who are highly skilled in the magical arts will possess their own unique domains of consciousness. It's like alchemy or hydromancy or whatever Alice does. It's something humans can do without any elements. Yeah, Mona has a vision now, but she started astrology and hydromancy long before she was given hers. So, once again, we're left with nothing. Well, if we can't answer what a Gnosis does, can we at least answer other questions about it? Remember when I said we'd come back to something? We're back to it. Are Gnosis things that can be shared? Can you receive a Gnosis that was not originally yours and still make use of it? We haven't met any other Archons yet that are considered official by Celestia, but aren't one of the originals, like Sumeru, Fontaine, Natlin, and Snezhnaya's all are. So we can't say whether they get a new Gnosis upon being knighted as an Archon, or if they just get the previous Archon's Gnosis. It would make sense if they get the previous Archon's Gnosis, since the Tsaritsa clearly believes in gathering all of the 7th Gnosis that she'll be able to do something with them, and she is a new Archon. But we can't say for sure, since in the Sands of the Husk of Opulent Dream set, which is about Scaramouche, it reads, "Later the lovely puppet would finally obtain that heart. It was, after all, his purpose for being, the very reason he existed. Yet it was not what the puppet truly desired, for it did not contain any blessings, but was instead a sacrifice brimming with selfishness, hypocrisy, cunning, and curses, all wrapped in an amiable husk." If he is referring to the Gnosis, which he is in possession of, not the Tsaritsa, according to Child in the 2.2 Labyrinth Warriors event, then clearly, whatever purpose he wanted the Gnosis for, it's not fulfilling it. If he wanted it for power, it's not giving him the power. And we know the Gnosis do contain some sort of power, given Zhongli's Ascension line, as we mentioned earlier, and also Venti says, each Archon has an internal magical focus that resonates directly with Celestia itself, known as a Gnosis. So if the Gnosis does contain power, but Scaramouche is unhappy with the Gnosis he has, then either A, the Gnosis isn't responding to him because he isn't Makoto, which would mean A never used Makoto's Gnosis, so the creation of Misogyn Gorge was just her raw power, which would be kind of insane. It would also mean that the Tsaritsa's gathering of the Gnosis isn't for more power, it's to do something else. Maybe destroy them to unleash their power, maybe use them all to create a doorway to Celestia, since this wonderful theory by Chill with Aster has completely convinced me that the real Celestia is not the island in the sky. And Venti says getting there requires an invitation. Maybe the Tsaritsa would try to reverse engineer them to understand how they work, since Snezhnaya is really technologically advanced. Maybe she'd make something mimicking a Gnosis with Archon residue, like how delusions mimic visions. Or maybe she doesn't know that a Gnosis will only work for its intended Archon, and her grand plan will fall apart at the seams. There's a lot of speculation we could do about the Tsaritsa's plans, but not a lot of evidence to back any of them up at this point in time. So it's really just food for thought, and nothing more concrete. Or another possibility is that Scaramouche didn't want the Gnosis for power. Maybe it's given him all the power in the world, but he's still unhappy with it because it hasn't given him what he really wanted, a heart. He still doesn't feel like a person, still feels empty. Or the Sands in the Husk of Opulent Dream set isn't referring to the Gnosis as the heart. Maybe he's referring to a delusion he was given by the Fatui when they unlocked his true potential, in which case we don't know what he's done with or what he thinks about the Gnosis. Which leaves us right back where we started. Still don't know what a Gnosis does, how it works, or who it works for. But we at least know what it's not. It's not useless, and it's not how the Archons can manipulate the elements. It might enhance their abilities, or it might give them new powers entirely. We don't know. And, yeah, it's a little frustrating to spend 6 hours writing and researching for a script that comes to the conclusion of, yeah, I don't know either, but it's still interesting to talk about at the least, and the more you know, the more other information means. Maybe they'll drop something in a random event that to the average Genshin player means nothing, but to people who pay attention to the lore, it's another piece in the puzzle. And that's why this isn't a Genshin Impact theory, it's a Genshin Impact lore discussion. I don't have answers, but oh boy do I have thoughts! Thank you if you made it this far in the video, I really appreciate it. The piece that's going on in the background is something I did for the Venti fan art contest, and I was really proud of how it turned out, because I've never tried a piece without line art before. If you like this kind of content, it would mean a lot to me if you could drop a like and maybe subscribe. I plan on making Genshin lore videos for the foreseeable future. It's something I spend a lot of time thinking and talking about, and it's a way for me to share my love of Genshin. I pay attention to theory crafting and how to build characters, but my artifact rolls are way too bad to make that sort of content myself. And I'm currently free to play because I'm kinda broke, so I can't really make rolling content. So this is what you get. But once again, thank you for watching, and I'll see you next time. Bye!